Good morning, how's it going? I have always liked monsters, so when I'm struggling to decide on what to make, or even struggling to think of anything, I go back to my roots to find some of that inspiration. For this sculpture, I didn't do any planning or sketching, I just needed to sit down and enjoy the process, just turn my brain off for a bit. So that's what I did, and I ended up really enjoying the end result. So let's get started. In my head, I was imagining just making a bust, the head and the shoulders, so I could make the sculpture bigger than I normally would, with more room for details. I'm using aluminium armature wire that I've wound together to make it a bit stronger. I then cover the wire with foil, trying to build up the shape and gauge the proportions as I go. Once I have a thin layer of clay over all the tinfoil, I move on to blocking out the big shapes with more lumps of clay. I start with the nose to get a general idea of where everything is and continue building up around the jawline, chin, and eyes with vague lumps that I can refine later. I had a quick look through Pinterest to get a general idea of what I was trying to do and see how other people build the shape that I was looking for. I used these, and although they are not anything like what I wanted this to end up looking, they give a good foundation to work from. I pre-baked some small balls of clay for the eyes so that I can build up around them without changing the curvature or marking the surface. This is one of the first tips I picked up from watching other people make sculptures on YouTube. This technique is also really useful if you're making teeth. To pre-bake them first and then stick them into the unbaked clay makes your life a whole lot easier. I built up the brow bone and forehead a bit because I felt like it was a little off. Most of what I'm doing is trial and error, just adding and taking away until it looks right to me. I go back to the nose and define the nostrils and tip, working my way down to the mouth. For this sculpture though, I decided to have their tongue sticking out. Because I had no real plan, I was working on pure vibes and I liked the idea of them being a little cheeky and fun. A lot of monster depictions are supposed to be scary or menacing, but that wasn't what I was in the mood to make. I didn't want to make anything too serious. Also, I like the idea that monsters are not inherently bad or evil or whatever. They're just as nuanced as people or animals or what other creatures you can think of. Moving on to the ears, I shaped a piece of wire in the vague shape that I wanted, then coated it in clay. Wee lines of clay make up the ridge over the top of the ear, and then I go in with various ball styluses and carving tools to texture the inner ear. The closest thing I've ever made to something like this is my Groot video, which you are welcome to go back and watch if you want to. I'll link it up the top and in the description. Once I'm happy with the general shape, I attach it by poking holes into the side of the head. I add the clay around the seam to slowly merge the ear until it has a smooth transition. In my head, the sculpture was young, although I think that it isn't quite as young as it looked in my head. That's not something I'm mad about though. I'm of the opinion that the art goes where it goes, and in trying to fight that, all you do is make the process less enjoyable. I also wasn't settled on the expression for a lot of this process, and I think you can tell that there's some hesitation and back and forth. Like the eyebrows, for example. I wanted to make them more exaggerated, which would mean I could make the top of the nose more interesting and hopefully the eyes more expressive. Using clay is all about give and take, and that's what I like about it. Once the eyebrows are in, I detail them with the sharp end of a sculpting tool to give the impression of hair. I make 4 horns with small blobs of clay tapered at one end and in 2 different sizes. They are blended into the head and then textured with a ball stylus. I wrap a small line of clay around the base and then blend in one side so the horns blend smoothly into the skin. I add lines of clay for the collarbones and up the neck to give it some shape, then blend it all together. I also add a line down the back for the top of the spine and build up the back of the neck as well. This scar was a late decision, though I think it gives some good character, and once I'm happy with how it looks, I move on to the shirt. I add the collar around the neck and blend in one side to give the illusion that the shirt continues down over the body, and then detail around the collar. I add 2 lines intersecting to make the triangle under the collar, and then detail that the same way. The skin is also textured, starting with the nose. I use a ball stylus for the nose and over the tongue, and then move down onto the skin. I'm keeping all these marks as light as possible because I don't want them to look like wrinkles, just some slight differences to make it more interesting and avoid having too much blank space. I used air dry clay for the base because I wasn't really sure what would work. It did crack while it was drying, though I go in later to fix that without much bother. But now that's done, I can move on to the paint. I feel like I've been saying it a lot this video, but I had absolutely no idea how I was going to go about painting this. There's a lot more in the moment decision making that I generally try to avoid because I see it as a riskier way of working, but for this, I think it was a good exercise. I started with a brownish base coat that had a little purple in it. I was thinking about making them a more fun colour, but green was too basic ogre-like, red was just too much, and blue was just too Avatar, so I settled on beige with a subtle colour running through it. I used a dark purple for the recess shading. I mixed some red in with the skin colour for the nose, the tongue and the tips of the ears, and then went over the whole sculpture with varying shades of the original skin tone for depth. Pinks and reds around the eyes and nose, and watered down yellows and greens where I thought they worked. The eyes and horns also got a lighter version of the skin colour. The shirt then got an initial green, but I felt it was just too vibrant, so I went over it again with something more desaturated. I added some shadows where they were necessary, and then I went over it with a few subtly different shades to give the blank space some variation. The earring was based in grey, and then I went over it with a metallic silver paint. After that, I was onto the eyes, which I was quite excited about. I started with a light blue to make sure that I had a good circle for the base, and then added a dark blue around the edges. I then went in with a few different blues to detail the eye. I added a layer of resin to both the eyes and the tongue to make them shine, and then cured it with a little UV torch. I finish off the face with some freckles and then paint the base black to tie everything together. And that's us, onto the results. Thank you very much for watching. Please consider leaving a like and a comment and tell me what you think. If there's something you want to see me make in the future, please leave a suggestion. I always read them. So that's me done. As always, I hope you have a good rest of your day. What are you doing? What are you doing? You're right in the way. You are. You're right in the way. What are you doing? Can I... Excuse me. Hey, don't.